Well, if Dave eats baked goods, he'd be in hospital.
Yeah. Thing about is modality. Logical possibility, metaphysical possibilities, and nomological possibilities.
Or say, would it be nomologically sound for somebody to say that in 1530?
Before we actually kick off the main segment, we need to cover off what is meant by logical possibility, metaphysical possibility, and actual possibility, so that we're all on the same page for the discussion. So we should probably start with what we mean by a logical possibility. Now, a logical possibility speaks to sort of the structure of the proposition, doesn't it, Dave?
Yeah. When we're talking about this kind of thing, what we're talking about is modality. And what we mean by modality is the mode of way things can be true. So to get back to sort of more basics, you've heard the terms possibility and impossibility. And most of us are probably aware of contingent and necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all... Have you? Okay. Something that is necessary is something that... Because modality deals with possible worlds. So something that is necessary is something that exists in all possible worlds.
Oh, this is where one of the if God was a perfect being, blah-de-blah-de-blah arguments come from.
If God was the foundation of everything, then God would be necessary in every world, yeah. And something that's contingent is something that is true but might not have been true. So it's true that we're streaming right now, but it's also possible that we might not have been because our power might have gone out.
Yeah, us streaming is contingent on a number of things: power, internet, webcam, and all that sort of thing.
Past history, yeah. So when we talk... Sorry.
You said past history. It sounded like you said patisserie. And I wasn't sure what baked goods had to do with it, but...
Well, if Dave eats baked goods, he'd be in hospital.
Yeah. So it is contingent on baked goods. So when we think about these kind of possibilities, and when we say something is like necessarily necessary or contingent, when we think about contingent, we think about possibilities, and we think about logical possibilities and metaphysical possibilities, and there's something called nomological possibilities, which are actual possibilities. So they're in line with what we know about the world and science and that kind of thing. For something to be logical possibility, like you said, there's kind of, it's a logical structure. So if I say, the prime minister is a prime number, there's nothing logically incoherent about saying that. Because, it's possible that the word prime minister could be defined as a prime number, to put it in a simple term.
Yeah, I mean, something you should say there is at the stage of the logical structure, that's where you're actually defining the referent. So you can actually...
You're sort of describing what the word means.
Yeah.
But
so
in some senses, you also go by with what the words kind of generally mean as well. So
that's because people would generally do that as a standard.
That's the way natural language works, yeah.
Exactly. But it doesn't necessarily have to, does it?
No. You could say a square is an object with 8 sides at that stage. And there's nothing logically inconsistent unless you're using the word square to mean an object with 4 sides.
Exactly.
Or 4 equal sides.
I mean, you could say a square is an object with 8 sides, and then hold up this and say this is a square, and you'd be like, well, no.
Yeah.
That's not logically consistent with what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's nothing in the structure of that sentence that is logically inconsistent. But if you were to say swans are birds that are all black and all white. There's a logical inconsistency there.
You've got your contradiction.
Yeah, that's
So,
it.
so if P1 and P2 work together to form a conclusion, it doesn't matter if P1 is true as we would generally understand it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so a metaphysical possibility speaks to the way things are, like in some possible world. So if we go back to squares, it's impossible. It's not a metaphysical possibility that a square, you can have a square circle, because they're two different objects. If one's a square, it can't be a circle. If one's a circle, it can't be a square. And to go back to the Prime Minister example, you could say that it's logically possible for the Prime Minister to be a prime number, but not metaphysically possible, because prime ministers just aren't the kinds of things that can be prime numbers. You know, there's a problem in the relationship between the objects and how they're being described and that kind of stuff. And in the sense where if you were to say, without defining the square first, if you were to say a square is an object with 8 sides, that's not metaphysically possible, because generally a square is a geometric shape with 4 equal sides and 4 right angles.
So with metaphysical possibilities, we are regarding what the words generally mean.
Yeah, you're definitely filling in the referent there, unless it has been specified. And as Dave mentioned, generally people will fill in the referent at the logical stage as well, but it's not necessary. It's almost an error in reasoning, but it's the way we'd also do it. You know, what should be done is clarifying at that stage if we're talking about it.
Yeah,
so that's where an inference fallacy would actually be true.
How do you mean?
Because you're inferring the meaning of something in the logical one.
Yeah.
Might not be the case.
Which might not be the case, because it might just be being described in that logical sense.
Yep.
And so, of course, you have nomological possibilities as well, which are possibilities in the actual world. I should probably also mention things can be logically possible, but not metaphysically possible. Hence, the Prime Minister as a prime number is logically possible, but not metaphysically possible. But something can't be metaphysically possible and logically impossible.
Yeah.
Being logically possible is the ground for everything.
Like a pyramid type thing, or a reverse pyramid, I guess.
Yeah.
You need the logical possibility. If something is logically impossible, it entails it being metaphysically impossible.
Yeah. So another way to describe it will be, this will help with the nomological possibility as well. It's metaphysically possible that pigs could fly, because the world could have been different in the sense that pigs could have evolved wings. There could be some possible world out there where pigs did evolve wings and can fly. But it's not nomologically possible, because in the actual world, pigs didn't evolve wings and could fly. We could stick jetpacks on them, you know, and that would make it true in this world. Yeah.
But I know what you were actually meaning there.
Yeah, that's it. So to be metaphysically possible is basically to say that it's logically possible, and that there is some world where it makes sense in which we can say that these beings exist, given all the possible states of that possible world.
So if we tie this back into things, for example, like gods or the supernatural, you can follow that same sort of path. Now, I'm sure there are specific God claims that you might hear that do have these logical contradictions. But if you were to just say something like, God is a metaphysical being that created our universe as we know it, there's nothing logically impossible about that. So you could argue... Exactly. So from that angle, like, depending on the God concept. So if you were to sort of draw a line in the sand about all gods, Okay, yeah, some of them may well be logically impossible, some of them may be metaphysically impossible, but there is a metaphysical possibility that something like a god exists. Now, or something like the supernatural exists. But tying it back in, if you were to say sort of something like, God is this metaphysical being that's perfectly good and perfectly loving and allows people to be tortured for eternity in hell, we're starting to see an issue here, especially if you define what you mean by perfectly good and perfectly loving and the actions that you'd expect from that. Obviously, I'm expecting you all to fill in what you mean by that.
But it creates a logical impossibility.
Exactly.
The bigger the descriptions get, sorry.
They're saying mutually exclusive claims about the same thing create a logical inconsistency.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
it. And the more you add to whatever this concept is, the more likely it becomes logically inconsistent.
And what was that last type?
Sorry?
What was the last type? We had logically, metaphysically, and
nomologically.
Nomologically, and that's things that actually
can exist in an actual world, yeah, based on what we know about science and the way nature works. Things can be impossible according to that, or possible according to that. Like, another example is you could say it's nomologically impossible for me to run from here to New York in 5 minutes, because nature just doesn't work like that. But it's not metaphysically impossible, because there could be some world in which you could run like a flash and you could run over water and it could only take you 5 minutes to run from here to New York. The world could have been different in that way.
I'm sure there are going to be some sci-fi nerds who really want wormholes to exist in this reality, who are going to be saying that it's actually nomologically possible as well. But as we understand it now, yeah. Because then I suppose you could get really absurd sounding claims which sound logically possible and possibly metaphysically possible, but sound nomologically impossible, but are actually true across the board. Like a chicken can be a mayor of a town.
Yeah.
Because that has happened.
Yeah.
And a buffoon can be the leader of a country, as Britain proves.
If you say an intelligent person can be the leader of a country, then we might be treading on like icy ground.
I'm not sure we have any evidence for that.
Yeah. Metaphysically, definitely possible, but
yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think we've got the grounding there of what we meant by logically impossible, in the sense that it's about the form, it's the structure of it, you can define it, sort of thing. And when we're talking about metaphysically possible, we're talking about, possible in some possible world, and we'd have already filled in the referent at that stage unless it's otherwise specified. So we could say that, under certain parameters, gods and the supernatural can be metaphysically possible. It depends on the claim, and actual possibility is something in this world. And when you actually think about an actual possibility, something you could think about here is that there's different types of actual possibility as well, or nomological. If we were thinking about, say you live in a group house, right, and you ordered a bunch of pizzas and there was one left over. In fact, if it was your house, you wouldn't be interested in this, Kristen, I know. But there's one in the fridge. You happen to be hungry, and you think it's possible that no one else has eaten those slices of pizza. That's an actual possibility, but that's informed by a lack of knowledge. However, there are other types as well. So if you think about something like Michelangelo's flying machines and things like that, all of his designs, his blueprints and all of that, they were logically possible, they were metaphysically impossible, but the only thing that was actually stopping him was the technology of the time. So it was technologically impossible, but it was a future possibility once the technology was there. So
did Michelangelo do those as well?
The flying machine.
Da Vinci?
I am thinking Da Vinci. Yes, sorry. I'm not thinking about the sorry. Da Vinci's flying machine.
It's metaphysically possible that Da Vinci painted the Sistine Chapel.
I would have understood the confusion if you were getting them mixed up with the turtles, and then you said Donatello, because Donatello does machines, as we all know from the song.
Yeah, I wish I had made that mistake, but no. I think it was the pizza comment. I was talking about pizza, and then I leaned into Michelangelo. Still a Turtles reference. But
Ansfrieda has asked about a blog post. If they hope that we've done a blog post about this, because so that they can read about the different definitions and context of logical and possible. You mentioned technologically impossible.
Yeah.
One way to think of it is possible here just means the same thing as when we say something like psychologically possible and psychologically impossible. It could be psychologically impossible for you to eat a worm. But if your life had been slightly different, it might be psychologically possible for you to eat a worm.
Yeah.
And that's basically all that's being talked about, is something like that.
So when we talk about nomological possibility, does that take into account, so technologically speaking, is it nomologically possible for a supercomputer to exist? Or say, would it be nomologically sound for somebody to say that in 1530? Because at the time, the technology didn't exist, but it is a thing that now exists in the real world. So would that be a metaphysical possibility?
At the time, it would probably be a metaphysical possibility, because it wasn't possible at that time, but it's possible.
So
it's
nomological also
world.
takes into account the frame of context and reference.
And reference, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning shit today.
And actually, Ansfrieda, I mean, I did actually write some notes on this, so I can put this in. We do have a few posts about logic. There's one called "What Does It Mean to Be Logical?" and there's "Reason and the Reasoning Process," and they speak about classical logic a little bit. Dave's also working on a video that goes into detail about this a little bit more. And the notes that I've taken for this, I can put into a something a little bit more professional than what I've done. If that's helpful to you, I mean, I can just send it to you as it is with all the spelling errors on Twitter or something like that if you really want. But failing that, anyway, has everybody got it down what we mean by logical possibility, metaphysical possibility, nomological possibility, and maybe we could throw something in there like future possibility as well, just for fun.
I think I get it enough to follow the conversation and be chided for being an idiot every now and again when I jump in.
Awesome.
Welcome to me at my philosophy tutorials.
But I mean, that is my normal role when I come on the streams anyway, so we're up to speed for everything.
Awesome.